Budding.
Hey, welcome to episode number 20 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast, recorded April 19th, 2019. My name's Eric. I'm the host of the show. I'm based in Southern Ontario. I'm a hunter, target shooter, ham radio operator, VE3 EPN for you other operators out there, and computer geek. I got into preparedness when I was working frontline emergency services and witnessed an over-reliance on emergency services during major events such as ice storms, power outages, etc. I started a small preparedness company to help people get prepared and able to look after themselves for at least 72 hours, if not longer.
Hi there, my name is Ian. I live on a small hobby farm on Vancouver Island. I'm an outdoor enthusiast, sport shooter, reloader, and my farm's designated handyman. My professional background has taught me to adapt to unexpected situations and also reinforces my belief that learning never ends.
And I'm Alan. My friends and family call me a safety nerd. My background as a first responder has instilled in me a mind for safety. I teach first aid, coach my friends and family to be better prepared. I'm a locksmith by trade and have worked in the physical security industry for more than 20 years now.
All right, so we've got some budding content for you in this episode. We're going to start off with some news articles relating to preparedness in the outdoors. Next, we'll be letting you know about how we've improved our preparedness since our last episode. And then we'll get into the main topic of this episode. If you couldn't guess with the dad joke there, it's gardening for preppers.
I like the dad joke.
I think they're pretty good.
Coming from a group of dads, I can only imagine. So on to some news. I found a couple of articles from the last week that have that are really topical for this. Post-cyclone, we're about 4 weeks post-cyclone landing in Mozambique, Malawi, Zimbabwe, and they are running critically short on food and are reliant on external aid to make to keep people from starving to death. It's case in point of how an unavoidable natural disaster is making lives a whole lot harder than they already are. The other one I saw was coming out of Cuba, where the government policies are forcing food shortages for the people, although I will wager that Raul Castro there isn't going hungry by any means. Castro is blaming Trump for the problem, but a lot of economic troubles are due to trade issues with Brazil and Venezuela, which have left Cuba in a huge cash crunch. And since it's all government controlled, then there is no ability for anybody to break out on their own and take care of themselves.
Well, actually brings up a really good point too, because I mean, worldwide, I think we're running like about a 2-month ahead of delivery date kind of schedule for food supply. So we don't have a whole lot to begin with, but I think a lot of these third world countries and or communist dictatorships don't carry a large extra, food supply. So if there is some sort of interruption, it doesn't take much to run out, does it?
Well, we were actually just talking about this earlier today in the car. Most grocery stores have 3 days worth of food on an average day. They have about 3 days worth of supplies on hand. That's for their anticipated sales. If something goes wrong, those 3 days worth of supplies become 12 hours worth of supplies really quickly.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, I got some clickbait headlines for you today. I got rabbit Ebola strikes again. So it's it's kind of worse than you would think. It's a good life lesson, I think, for all of us, because this is actually really local to my area. What happened last year is my family's involved with the 4-H farm club, and basically there's different groups of people that, some people deal with horses, cows, rabbits, chickens, whatever have you. And last year the 4-H club got canceled because of rabbit hemorrhagic fever, which is basically a version of Ebola that's only affecting local rabbits. Take this as an allegory for worldwide life in general, but a lot of people around here have released their Easter bunnies that they get the kids. The bunnies grew up and are no longer cute, so they release them onto the university campuses and what have you. And sure enough, some of these university grounds and parks and everything else get overrun with domesticated rabbits, like not even the European cottontail. And sure enough, with these dense populations, they end up getting these diseases popping up where basically it's wiped out almost 100% of the domesticated rabbits in the area, to the point where even if you have a rabbit that hasn't been affected, it needs to be vaccinated every 3 weeks to 2 months or something like that. And that's like life support. That's all it does. It's a carrier no matter what.
Wow.
And so they actually can't bring in the 4-H program this year either, because there's all these carriers floating around. But interestingly enough, the rabbits that stayed wild, aren't affected. So the European cottontails that were introduced like a couple hundred years ago are not affected, but the domesticated ones were. And sure enough, high population density, disease breaks out.
Huh.
Shocking how that happens. It's
Yeah,
almost
exactly.
as if this has been happening for thousands of years.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very interesting, and the fact is that there's obviously no known cure. It doesn't affect humans, but still not a pleasant way to go for sure.
Yikes.
No.
Yeah. So don't come to Vancouver Island with your pet rabbit.
Got it.
Deal.
All right, so I've got an article here from Quebec. It's about 3 hours ago, according to the posting. It's Canadian forces asked to help in flood emergency preparedness. So the Quebec Public Security Minister has just asked for help from the Canadian forces in southern Quebec emergency preparedness against spring flooding. And I don't know about you two guys, but in my area, we're certainly seeing quite the rise in rain and a little bit of flooding here and there. Absolutely. So it's coming. My front yard right now is a big pond.
Yeah, we've had a couple of days of rain here, and the cornfield behind my house is pretty much a swamp.
Yeah, I think our flood season has ended. We're just beginning the dry season, so we're actually we're happy that it's over with. So
my sump pumps are going quite continuously. They go quite continuously for the most part, but now it's like a constant go instead of a couple minute break and then go. So it's here. But the snow's melting.
Is the foundation around your house, is it like sand, or is it clay, or was it I guess it must be sandy?
Yeah, it's sandy.
Yeah.
Mine's all clay, but it slopes down from the road, so the water has nowhere to go.
That'll do it. Let's see. Let's move into what we've done lately for our preps. So for myself, I finished a certification for work, which also would apply to day-to-day life, and it's a typical computer geek certification. So got that all done and played around with the network here at the house, which was evident when we were trying to set up here earlier. So got the certification, but had to push a few more buttons. But anyways, I cleared off another university course as well. I'm working on a bachelor's of professional arts through Athabasca University. So I've got 8 more courses to go. So slowly pushing my way through that. Secured my internet connection, which was causing a few little hiccups there, but we figured it out. So all the ones and zeros that I'm sending out your guys' way is all encrypted, coming and going. So that was a fun little project to set up. And I got into my first purchase of precious metals, grabbed a 10-ounce silver bar. So that is now in the safe. That is a big bar. It is a big bar. Yeah, it's interesting what they've really taken off with the preparedness people as well. You can find the 1 ounce pieces. You can get the ones that break up into little, you can break off little pieces of each ones. They're kind of pre-etched. You can break off as required. It's actually come quite a ways in the last little while, hasn't it? That's kind of neat. One of the guys in one of the groups I'm in actually posted that they were selling. It's a Canadian place. I think they're out of Alberta, if I remember correctly, but they were selling the bar at spot price. I was like, I'll have a look at it, and figured, why not? I'll grab something to throw in the safe, and then I've got it.
Worst case scenario, you can drop it on somebody's head.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Why not? Protection, monetary, it works. It's a good projectile. So as myself, well, I finished up a big stretch of work. So I got back home, played catch up on the animal feeding and watering and all that stuff. Once I got that out of the way, did some much needed maintenance on the log splitter. Went to the range finally for the first time in I don't know how long. It's crazy how I don't go nearly as much as I would like. But anyway, split up some baby chickens, not individually. I'm saying by the group. So I kept them all intact anyway. So we split up some baby chickens into different flocks depending on what their end game is. So we kept we figured out who was the male and put him off into the grow out coop to grow up for his big day. And females, depending on the breed for the chicken showing, put them into different coops as well. And then ran the splitter with all the wood I'd cut down there last month, I guess. I ran the splitter pretty much for 3 days straight to restock the winter wood supply. And that's about it for me.
Fantastic. This past week, my better half and I attended a Stop the Bleed training. So I discussed that a couple of weeks back, that it's being offered at no charge by the local hospital, by the local trauma center. So we went and did that, which was pretty cool. Learned to pack wounds and put on tourniquets, and the wound packing was probably the most interesting part of that. But it was kind of something we got to do together, which was nice, and getting getting set up for next weekend. I'm going out to do my wilderness and remote first aid. So get to go and touch all my camping gear and take some new things out there and try some new skills and techniques. Ended up stocking up on some hygiene products this week, and we're trending towards having a year's worth of supplies in the house to stay clean. And then today, even actually, I picked up the shortwave study guide from the local club. So made contact with the local shortwave radio club, and we're gonna do that. And I'm thinking by Christmas I'll be ready to write that test. So throw that in with all my other training, and it'll be a busy year of reading.
Oh, awesome! We can start chatting on the ham radio frequencies then.
That's the end game. Yep.
Well, and having the house year's worth of cleaning supplies will come in handy for next episode too, I guess, won't it?
It's almost as if it was planned that way.
Yeah.
Look at that. Who'd you do the wilderness first aid through?
It's a Red Cross program. The local instructor. It's something I've done many times before. The local instructor is someone that I've worked with for many years. She's really well versed and a fantastic outdoors person in her own right, and just huge vast volumes of experience in being out in the wilderness. And so yeah. I'm excited, mostly just as much to get out camping as to actually refresh on some skills. So,
oh, awesome! All right, how about we move into the main topic of the show: gardening for preppers.
Yeah, I guess the first thing we should ask or talk about is why we're chatting about this. So I guess I've heard it on the internet. I'm sure you guys have too. About a lot of people say, "Well, I'm all set for food supply because I got a vacuum packed or freeze dried can of garden seeds. I'm good to go."
Oh yeah, perfect. If you plan on eating seeds.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to have a nice chia snack or something, but yeah, no. So I mean, grabbing a packet of seeds and hoping it's going to make it work during the zombie apocalypse is not going to work, right? So I think we can all agree you need to gain experience growing food before it becomes vital to your survival.
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
It's just not going to go well the first couple of years. There's more than a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to growing vegetables.
Oh, and it's not even just the growing part too. It's all the other associated stuff we'll talk about later on here. But it's a multifaceted skill set that you need to work on for sure. A couple points I had here right off the bat was like, if in that vacuum pack, number 10 can of seeds, do you have seeds that'll actually grow in your climate? It would be the number one question, because they probably pack it for the southern U.S. or whoever the supplier is, and it might not work for your climate, right?
Exactly.
There are no orange trees in southern Ontario.
Exactly. I mean, we could talk about other Eric Protector. When he was on the other day, like his climate's going to be vastly different than yours or mine or anything else. So just a regular pre-canned can of seeds isn't going to work all the time. And I guess the other thing too is like most of those garden seeds you buy are not heritage seeds, right? Like they won't regerminate necessarily. Sometimes they're expecting you to come back every year and buy a new packet of seeds, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's something you got to keep in mind, right? If you don't have seeds for the year after and the year after that and the year after that, no good.
Well, yeah, and I guess a lot of people, even to figure out how to grow your own seed plants is a bit of a skill set as well. I know nothing about it, full disclosure, but I mean, like some guys were saying that takes years to even get established with a seed that works well for your climate, your area, and that you can work with.
Oh yeah,
something my grandparents did that for decades. They started the seeds that they had, and then started the seeds that they purchased, and then they my grandma bought flower seeds every year, and then she used seeds from the previous year's crops to grow next year's crop, which was a skill that she learned over a lifetime, not something that she figured out on the go when she didn't have access to a grocery store.
Well, actually, just one thing before I forget, we didn't write it in the show notes, but with those seed packets too, a lot of times you'll lose about 10% of the viability per year. So after like the seed packet's been sitting there for 10 years, you might not get any germination out of the thing too, right?
Yeah,
that's no good to you.
No, I mean, I think we've all heard stories about seeds that were left in the pyramids that were good 2,000 years later or whatever, but that's not always the case. Especially in a nice wet climate like mine or something like that, they'll just rot away to nothing. So
don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Exactly.
It's the first rule of journalism, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I was actually going to ask you guys what your thoughts are on like prepper-related crops, maybe guys that were starting out could think of growing.
Well, potatoes are probably one of the most natural in terms of being easy to grow, being easy to manage in terms of pest control. They can be grown just about anywhere. You can grow like 100 pounds of potatoes in like 12 cubic feet, like 4x4x4 box. You can grow. They're easy to grow. They're easy to regrow. Calorically dense, decent nutrition to them. Obviously, you can't live on potatoes alone, but it's a really good one to start with.
You can make booze from
really
it.
Hard to screw it up.
And, how many million Irish people can't be wrong? But no, seriously, I mean, you can technically, I suppose, if you had to live, poorly on it. But I mean, yeah, you can make booze with it. They are obviously easy to reseed and everything else. It's a really good one for sure.
Yep.
I was actually thinking.
I would say start with the tuber. Start with the things that grow underground. They're less susceptible to predators than your berries and tomato plants.
Yeah, so actually I was going to bring this one up. So as far as tubers go, for the YouTube or for the podcast listeners, I'm holding up what looks like an atomic potato, but it's or a horribly disfigured one anyway. But it's called a Jerusalem artichoke, also known as a sunchoke, and I think they've got about 3 or 4 other names. But basically, the interesting thing about them from a prepper perspective is they're obviously perennial. They come back every year. Very easy to grow. Marty, who is going to be on here tonight, wanted me to mention the fact that they're extremely invasive. So if you don't plant them anywhere, you don't want them to take over. When you peel them off, they look like this, which is more like a turnip or a kohlrabi or something like that. You can eat it raw, which is nice, or you can eat it cooked. It's like a potato. And it's very easy to grow. Like I got this from actually my down the island prepper friend. We'll call him Better Ian. Anyway, he gave me 3 bags of these things, and he's just overwhelmed by them. And this early in the year, so we're early into April, and he's like overwhelmed with these things. So our plan was kind of plant some in the crown land behind us and see how they take off. So
why not?
I figure the government can supply me with some gardening spots, because if they are invasive, great. But if they're not, I mean, I noticed that the alpacas will eat the leaves that come above ground. So I mean, I can't really have them here unguarded. So
that's why we can't have nice things, Ian. If you're going to go plant invasive species on crown land, that's how we lose crown land.
No, come on, that's only like on the fence line. We'll put it that way. So. But I figured that was a good one that people always talk about on the internet, but not too many people have actually seen one. So if people on the podcast want to take a look at the YouTube video, they can see what one looks like. That when you pull up from the ground, they're good size. You can peel them with a spoon.
If you told me that was a ginger plant, I wouldn't have been able to tell you the difference. It looks a lot like a ginger root.
Well, exactly. Just like a ginger, you can take a spoon to it just to peel the skin off, so you don't lose too much. And actually, they're quite tasty. We were actually snacking on a couple of these just before the show, but of course, my buddy calls them fartichokes because they do create quite a bit of gas when you eat them, especially raw. So
appreciate the warning.
In the cooler climate, that'll just help keep you warm, and you'll have to burn less wood.
Yeah,
free methane. It's not a bad thing.
Free methane for you. What do you guys have you guys tried any growing onions or anything like that, or carrots or anything like that?
I've had luck with carrots and tomatoes have taken off here. We actually had them take over our garden last couple of years. So they've been good.
Yeah,
I grew up in a giant garden, and we had tomatoes, like green onions especially, were great, and peppers. My grandma, especially my grandma, she could do anything with peppers, and to the point where we were giving them away by the basket.
We've had really good luck with beets as well.
Yeah, interesting. Like, because I guess storage is another factor that comes into play. Like one thing I wanted to talk about was like squash, turnips, that type of thing, because we've had a couple of squashes that were growing last fall. We finally just cracked them open here like last week, and they were still good. They just sat right on the kitchen counter for literally months on end and didn't degrade at all. So as far as shelf stable foods, maybe want to think about some sort of spaghetti squash or something that you actually find appealing. Make sure you'll actually eat it. But squash are definitely a nice shelf stable food as well.
Oh, good call. Yeah, I wouldn't even have thought of that.
Yeah, I was actually shocked at just how fresh it was when we cracked it open. Like, I mean, of course, the skin on it's probably like almost half an inch thick. But one thing I actually did as a bachelor, even before before I got into the prepping full throttle here was I grabbed green onions out of the grocery store, and when you clip the tips off, I just threw them right in like small little can, and sure enough, you get free green onions for life, basically, which you can do indoors, outdoors, whatever have you year round. Save it a little bit of money that way, which is always good. Plus, it's an easy way to get into the whole gardening thing too, which requires pretty much zero effort and zero cost.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, well, that's going to come down to our podcast challenge later. Is just grow something. It can be anything, but that's an easy one to grow. It's something that we've I know I remember doing that in school. You can do that with avocado. You can do that with bean sprouts. You can do that with just about anything. So, or not just about anything, but you can do that with a fair number of them where it doesn't take a whole lot to grow and they're easy to regenerate.
Yeah. Have you guys got any big trees in your yard, like apple, cherry, crab apple, that stuff?
I do not.
I have an enormous maple tree and some pine trees, but I don't have anything. Fruit doesn't grow well around here. We have a few apple orchards, but they're pretty high maintenance.
Yeah, like interesting. Like modern day commercial production is very chemical and time intensive and everything else to grow, and because of course those trees aren't really naturally producing that many apples unless they're really worked on. But we planted a few apple trees here, but that's one of those things where you can plant it and not expect any fruit for like 5-10 years type of thing, depending on the climate, right? But a good investment over time, but not short term for sure.
Well, definitely not short term, which is which comes down to the prepping part of prepared is that it can take 5 to 10 years before you've got viable crops, and so get good at it now before you need to, because it's going to be a whole lot harder to do it later.
Oh, absolutely. A couple of things I want to touch on: water supply. Whether it be during a normal time or adverse time, I guess you want to make sure you have enough supplies to keep your garden going. So that's where the rainwater catchment would come in, or any sort of hand. Not all of us, I guess, are lucky enough to have a hand pump in our basement either. So.
Yeah.
Well, it's also important that you regulate the water, because if you're directing all of the water from your roof into your garden, then you may end up over watering it, which is just as bad as underwater.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, we've got a couple rain barrels that collect the rain for us throughout the summer, and then we just take buckets over to water the garden. So works out well.
Yeah, for us, our big thing is trying to get enough soil to actually grow stuff, because we're basically on a rock hillside, and so we're basically having to make our own soil as we go here, which is time intensive as well. But if you combine it with other things such as the animals that we have, chicken poop, alpaca poop, with a bit of bark mulch from the local greenhouse guy, it's amazing how fast you can make your own dirt for sure. So it's something to be said about having your own compost heap to make your own soil.
That's on our list for the summer too, is getting into composting and diverting a bunch of the stuff from throwing it in the garbage can to just out into the composter in the back. So hopefully it's working.
Well, interesting, if you go to a place like Starbucks, they'll give away their used coffee grounds for free, pre-bagged, and basically you plant those, and it smells not bad either, and it basically breaks down relatively fast and gets you some good soil over time.
Oh, Starbucks is good for something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's got to be good for something.
Inside voice.
Not just burnt coffee. So, what do you guys know anything about hydroponics or anything, or greenhouse usage?
It's very heavily reliant on like chemical fertilizers, just because there's no natural chemical in the soil. There's no natural minerals in the soil because there's no soil. Yeah. So to do that, it's certainly doable. It's certainly viable. It gets done on a regular basis, but it's not something that can just happen overnight. You have to have the fertilizer, like the liquefied fertilizer, in store and ready to go. Otherwise, there's just nothing for the plant to draw from.
I remember living in Ontario, we used to hear about the Dutch nutrient formula all the time for the hydroponics, but never really got into it because I figured it was like a high usage of electronics required and pumps and everything else. Like my cousin's big into hydroponics on the mainland there, but I've never touched it myself.
I've never messed around with it either.
Well, there's a big there's a bit of a push for like indoor vertical farming that I've seen over the last couple of years, which can be it's kind of cool because it can be done in a sea can with natural light if you put a a lighted roof in it, but it doesn't require any soil. It's if you have the right nutrient balance, then you can put an exceptionally large garden in a very small space anywhere in the world, which is a really interesting proposition, because that's one of the biggest challenges we have, is that we have, in terms of food security, we have a whole lot of places in the world where we can't grow vegetables, where we can't grow whatever food, fruits, vegetables, tubers, starches, whatever they may be, without a lot of effort. But if we can do it in a more compact way, then we relieve the strain, and you can do that in just about any climate, as long as you can keep the interior climate of that can or that container or that warehouse at an acceptable level. So it's one of those emerging technologies that is going to be really interesting in a few years to see whether that's something that becomes, we're going to start seeing people turning their garage walls, the inside of their garage walls, into a 7 or 10 layer vegetable garden.
Well, that's interesting. Well, especially if you buried the sea can, it'd be good to keep it nice and warm and everything else. You can't actually bury sea cans. The roof will collapse. That's engineering mishap, unfortunately.
Yep. You can't bury them too far without proper support. So there's a bit of a caveat there. Yep.
Also, I was going to say, with the sea cans and whatever have you, that's actually a good idea. You suppose you could stack them or whatever, if you're space limited. It's something. I never thought of that.
Well, exactly. Yeah, you can line up a few sea cans vertically and lengthwise side by side, and then in theory, 500 square feet can grow 20,000 square feet of vegetables. So and that's, you take that and you expand it over things like remote communities in Canada, where it's incredibly expensive to bring food in, and you can only do it under very specific circumstances like ice roads, or you do that in places like in remote Africa, where it's very difficult to get food into places. Then from a prepping perspective, if you can do it, it means that you have food security no matter what. From a preventing emergency situation, then it just seems to make a whole lot of sense if it's viable.
Well, I mean, you can make it viable too. Like, in all seriousness, if you go down about 15 feet below the surface, you get down to below the frost lines in most places, but also you get down to where the geothermal kicks in. And it actually, about 15 feet down is where the average temperature year-round is maintained. So whatever your average temperature is above ground is usually what it is about 15 feet down year-round. So it's actually wouldn't be that hard to heat if you did have a deeper basement or whatever, have to work on your garden down there.
Exactly. So if you've got the right infrastructure in place, and it takes a fair bit of planning for that, then you have the ability to do that. So definitely something to keep an eye on. That you don't need a lot of space, and you don't need a lot of soil to grow vegetables.
Yeah, that's true. So I also want to touch on garden predator protection, which I think a lot of new garden people have trouble with because they don't realize how big of a problem it can be.
Oh, yes.
If you don't have rabbit Ebola, eviscerating the rabbit population, you do have rabbits that get into your garden through the smallest little holes. I personally have issues with alpacas that stick their neck through fences and eating stuff they're not supposed to. They've even gone as far as getting the dog to chew open some bungee straps so they can get into the fence, and working as a team, of course. Yeah. Birds coming in during, if you have raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, birds will come in just as you're ready to pick them yourself. They're coming in and picking them for you. There's a lot of things that you have to protect your crops from, because pretty much everything other than you is also trying to eat your crops.
Yeah, we've got
squirrels.
Yep.
Trash pandas around here. We've got a pretty healthy raccoon population, and they'll eat just about anything. And what I learned when I was a kid is that crows like vegetables too. There was a murder of crows that used to visit my grandparents' garden every fall and just take over the gooseberry plants of all things.
Huh.
Like a Hitchcock special.
Yeah, it was. There were a few days I would look out there and go, yeah, I'm not going out there. But it makes you Go ahead.
I was surprised that the squirrels were taken off with our tomatoes. Didn't think they'd like tomatoes.
And it looks funny when they're running away with it too, and it's bigger than their head, and they're they're holding it and running for dear life. Yeah.
Or some of them are so big they couldn't get them really. They got them over the edge of the garden, so we had a big garden box, and then they would drop them, eat a little bit, and then just take off. leave most of it sitting there like a big slap in the face. But,
jerks. At least if you're going to at least take the whole thing. Be responsible with it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, at least you know that during the zombie apocalypse, the scores will get settled with the squirrels and the trash pandas, right? I mean, that
Exactly.
they'll eventually be food too. So there you go.
So what can we do for predator control? I guess it's like step one is chicken wire. It's not terribly convenient for us, but it'll certainly do the job of keeping out most birds and most squirrels and most predators. Other things to be aware of are the mites and worms that will feed on your vegetables too. So pesticides are an entirely different animal. But the bigger predators, chicken wire is good. It's basic. It's easy to put up. A couple of 2x2 stakes in the corners and stretch it around. Staple it on. Make sure you bury those stakes deep enough that they can't just get knocked over by alpacas or gorillas or whatever you may come up against.
That's right. So bird netting, of course, over top of some smaller gardens. If you have a garden, like a raised garden bed, you can put bird netting over top to keep the birds from flying in from the top part of the fence. That's one way to do it, because a lot of them will only come down vertically. They won't come down through the little fence holes or whatever have you. Also with rabbits, I guess you got to bury the fence down a good foot, because they'll try and dig under. Being little diggers that they are. And then goats too. I mean, goats will chew through some smaller fence material, like up to including chicken wire, I suppose, if they had to get to some of your crops. So if you think you might be secure, but you also have animals, you really got to watch that as well.
Yeah. Although if you have goats that are coming to your garden regularly, that's probably not a bad thing if things really do go south, because then you have another source of food coming to visit you and fewer predators.
Goat curry. All right. What they also want to touch on too is like considering, I guess maybe just take a look around, see what grows in your local area, because if you can find the wild edibles that you like, they're going to grow in the area well and flourish. Like, for example, right now we've actually got introduced species behind in the Crown Land. They're like a larger version of the common blackberry, but they're called Himalayans. The blackberries themselves are probably bigger than my thumb. And they're massive, which is nice, and they're highly invasive. So it's nice to have a little stand of them nearby. But if I want to plant them on the property, I know they grow really well. Also, an interesting note too: dandelion in North America was an introduced plant, and it's a food source. So instead of spraying them, you've got some salad greens right off the bat.
Yep.
I don't know about the flower though. I don't think the flower is edible.
I don't know. We get tons of them here, but I've never ventured to try and actually throw them into a salad or anything.
So I guess if you want to, blow the seeds around on your front yard and piss off your neighbors, I suppose it's a food source ready made.
No, really, guys, you'll thank me later. I promise.
Yeah, you'll thank me when the shit hits the fan for sure.
Yep.
Interesting tidbit. I was actually watching Bear Independent, another prepper channel on YouTube, and he brought up a good point that you need 750 pounds to 1,000 pounds of food per person per year. And you start thinking about how much that is, and how many cans of rice you may have in your basement or not. And actually, you realize how fast it is to come up short. So I think when you were mentioning how many pounds of potatoes you can grow in a small spot, that really comes into play, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a lot of weight.
100 pounds of potatoes sounds like a lot until you realize that's potentially only 10% of your needs.
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, I did some research when he said that. I was like, I don't think it's that much. But no, he was actually probably on the on the low side of things. I mean, if you're actually sitting there, burning lots of calories every day, just trying to keep the house warm and fend off the zombies or whatever have you. There's lots of things to do. So you're going to burn more than your average 2,000 calories a day. You're going to probably be burning closer to 4, right?
Takes a lot of energy to make a tinfoil hat.
Exactly. Or you can just keep yourself from freezing to death. You can burn a lot more calories just trying to stay warm, right?
Well, I mean, if what is it, 4,000 calories a day? It's only 3 pounds of food for 4,000 calories, and that's that adds up. When you've got more than one person, you've got 365 days in a year, and if you're thinking that that's going to take a while before life gets back to normal, and you've got external sources again, like that goes quickly.
Well, yeah, and interesting. I did a little research on how much farmland we're going to need to feed one person, basically, and it says basically you need 1,000 square feet. even up to 2 acres for one person for a year, just if you're going to be a vegan, I suppose, depending on who you ask and what type of land you have and everything else. But yeah, so minimum 1,000 square foot garden would probably be a good idea, I would think.
That's a big garden to manage.
Oh yeah, no, it would be
I
for
think
sure. I mean, but
the garden I grew up with was it was 120 feet wide by 60 feet deep, and I'm not prepared to do the math on that right now, but that kept most of us, like there were anywhere from 4 to 6 of us, in a reasonable quantity of vegetables most of the year.
Yeah, so
but
I threw
that was
Oh, go ahead.
that was not the sole source of vegetables. That was definitely not the sole source of food.
Yeah.
But it was it was better than nothing. So it was a good supplement to regular food stores.
Yeah, so I put a couple links in there in the show notes, just so people can take a look, figure out how much land they're actually going to need to, supply even a percentage of what they might need for a good year's supply of food, or a renewable food source, which is always a good thing to have, right?
Yep.
All right, so Eric,
renewable is the big one there. It's great to sit, to go out and buy. You can go to Home Depot right now and buy a couple of tomato plants and a couple of pepper plants, and that's fine and dandy. But when you can't just go out and buy those pre-seeded plants, then what?
Yeah, that's where the heritage seeds that regerminate come in handy too, right?
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so you got more research execution in a lot of cases.
Yeah, so my thumb is far from green. We just started kind of about 2 years ago now. We put in the raised garden bed, and successfully at least have been able to produce a couple salads for us. The tomatoes last year kind of took over absolutely everything, and so we had way too many tomatoes, but made for a good salad at least. Like I mentioned, the squirrels, for whatever reason, like the tomatoes, and take off with them. I think we covered off some good ways of pest control for that. I don't have that in the show notes, but I think we've covered off some good stuff.
Otherwise, just shoot the bastards. That's the other option.
That's where pelican comes in handy. Relatively quiet, Just
I enjoy letting the dog out, and I just watch them chase them, and that that works out quite well. I put the chicken wire up, and one squirrel ended up sneaking in. Because we put it around all 4 corners and then over the top as well. We had one sneak in. I let the dog out. The dog saw him and I actually chased him 360 for a couple of minutes. So it worked out well. It was exercise for the dog, tired him out. And the squirrel didn't come back for about a week and a half. So it was good.
Perfect.
But then he did come back eventually. But it is what it is. But it's certainly an important skill to learn, and not something that everybody thinks of right off the bat. They think, like we said, we'll just grab some seeds and throw them in the basement, and then if something happens, I'll just throw some seeds in the ground and watch everything grow, and I'll be fine. But it's an important skill to practice and figure out what works well for you and what doesn't, because the time to learn isn't when you can't go to the grocery store to get anything.
And I hate to harp on those seed packages too again, but like a lot of those seed packages or the Home Depot tomato plants, they're all the same variety, right? Whether it be Haas, avocados, or anything else, like they seem to focus on 1 or 2 varieties, and if you have some sort of a blight go through, I think it probably behoove most people to have a different variety of some sort, or at least a few different varieties, right? Oh,
absolutely, yeah. One other thing that grew really well in our garden was hot peppers. They were easy, simple. They grew very well. They were very hot. I figured I would just bite into one and see. I didn't think they'd get that hot, and they were getting warm. But I like spicy stuff, so that was all right. But yeah, if anybody wants to venture in there, they grew very well in our garden the last couple of years and produced quite a bit. So,
and vitamin C.
Yeah. What variety peppers did you grow?
So this year I did some habanero and some jalapenos.
Yeah, I've done jalapenos in the past. They like you said, they grew really well, and they're really resilient. They're very versatile, or they're good for versatile climates. So that was nice.
And the squirrels didn't like them.
No, exactly. I was actually just going to say that it's another method of pest control. Something of an old wives' tale, but I found it to be very effective. Is crushed chili powder. Put it around the edge of your garden. It becomes a good deterrent, because the animals don't like being near that smell. They don't like the acidity of it. So
I grew another one. I can't remember the full name. It was Dragon something or other. It was a big, long pepper, and it turned out quite well. I just took all of them, mixed them together, and I made about 6 or 7 cans of hot sauce out of it. So it worked out well. Yeah.
That's cool. So I guess getting started in gardening for preppers, one is your space. So obviously, depending on your space, that's going to dictate the type of garden that you go with. A great place to start is with a raised bed. So very few natural soil, undisturbed soil that is in your backyard right now. Very few types of soil are actually good to grow anything more than grass and weeds. But a raised bed gives you the control over the moisture quantity, gives you control over the soil quality, but you have to start from scratch. So build a frame. It's best to avoid using pressure-treated lumber. There are theories out there that the chemicals from the pressure treating can leach into the soil, which can be not so great for you. So use cedar if you can. If not, pressure treated, or just use plain spruce. 2x6, 2x8, 2x10. Whatever you have handy there. Build a frame, add some drainage gravel at the bottom so the soil doesn't get too wet, and then go talk with your local garden center and find out what a good potting soil or vegetable soil is. Have a couple of yards delivered. It doesn't cost a whole lot, and it saves the suspension of your car on your vehicle. Get in there, and that'll give you a good bed to start with. You can also build those beds into the ground in a tiered fashion. The big issue is you want to be able to control. You don't want too much moisture in the ground. So if you don't have, like the soil around my house is all clay. So if we tried to plant in there, not only is there no nutrient, but there's no soil there's no place for water to drain. So every time we get rain, we get puddles in the lawn. Raised beds take care of that as a problem. It also means that you can compartmentalize your crops so that if those squirrels get in on your tomatoes, they don't necessarily affect your peppers.
Do you find it helps with weeding as well?
Absolutely, because again, you don't have the invasion of your natural, the invasion of your grass and whatever's in your lawn is not blowing in there. It's hitting the sides and dropping instead of coming, creeping in the way it otherwise would.
That makes sense.
So that's a good place. That's a good place to start. I was learned real good from a young age to always start my plants early. My grandma was a master of indoor growing. She had the grow lamps, and she would start all of her seeds in March, so that she had plants that were 4 to 6 inches tall when it came time to plant them outside, and they were. She had them on a schedule, and she had very specific soil for it. I've never been successful growing anything indoors, but that can work for you. Like, she literally grew vegetable plants in the basement with fluorescent lighting.
Huh.
So it can be done. Yeah.
Is that you, Alan, or is that Eric?
Sorry?
Oh, I just got a kind of a background noise going on there.
No, don't think it's me. I'm the only one home.
I can hear it too, but I don't know where it's coming from. I don't think it's coming from mine.
Interesting.
I'm looking at Eric and his funky internet.
Hey, easy.
It's the new network.
It's fixed now.
So now's our big chance to swear, right, Alan?
Yeah. So the next big thing to talk about is fertilizer, which is it's shit all over the place. There are lots of different fertilizers, of course, based on lots of different animals, and they all have their benefits and their drawbacks. The ratio of nutrients in the fertilizer is dependent on the diet of the animal and the mixture between the alpaca and chicken poops versus horse, sheep, cow, whatever it may be. So again, go find out what your plants need. So based on the plants you want and the natural nutrients in the soil that you've used, find the right type of fertilizer to make up for the deficiency in nutrients. Most fertilizers have a ratio of nitrogen and hydrogen. I forget what the other one is. That's usually a 3-digit combination. So find the one that works for the soil for whatever's lacking in your soil, and that will help your plants thrive. If they don't have fuel to draw from in the soil, they can't grow.
Well, yeah, and I want to touch on that as well. If there's one thing we learn about with all the animals around here is the different types of poop. So rabbit and alpaca are, of course, depends on what the animal eats is what kind of poop they're going to produce too, right? So generally the herbivores is what you want. You don't want predator poop like dog poop or anything else going in your garden. It's not going to work that well. Chicken poop, for example, is super high in nitrogen. Well, it'll burn your plants right off the bat. So if you don't let chicken poop compost for at least a year before you use it, you're going to destroy everything you have. So for all the new chicken people, don't just immediately throw it on your plants thinking that you're going to do your plants a favor. And but alpaca and rabbit, you can throw on the ground right off the bat. As soon as they deposit, you can throw it right on your garden. It'll break down in a matter of days with rain. And it's actually basically just mildly composted grass is all it is. So as a general rule, you can use that stuff right off the bat. So
or you could become like the pigs from Animal Farm and just have the alpacas poop right out in the fields and save yourself a step.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's very interesting. And of course, like you'll notice that Home Depot and places like that do sell big bags of sheep manure because I think that's probably the easiest to work with because it's basically broken down into soil already by the time they sell it. But it doesn't take a whole lot to make your own soil. Like, for example, I was mentioning the local tree guys, when they actually get a truck full of wood chips, and they actually have to pay money to dump it at the dump, but they can drop it off at my place for free. I mix it with the alpaca poop. And literally a month later, I've got black soil, which is nice. So it does work out really well if you can provide your own or make your own. But even just to augment what you already have, like so if you already got good dirt in your backyard, well, just add some mild natural fertilizer. It makes a world of difference, right?
Yep, and know how to measure that too. I mean, there are pH test strips for just about everything. But if you can learn to recognize what good soil looks and smells like, you can figure out what it needs, so that when you don't have access to, Home Depot's big bag of sheep poop, that you know what you're looking for to make up the difference. Also, don't go buying giant quantities of nitrogen fertilizer unless you have a really good reason to. It puts you on a government list.
Especially if you go to the gas station right afterwards and order 10 gallons a day or 10,000 gallons of diesel.
If you're not on a watch list already, you're not doing it right.
I'd say the three of us are probably already on a watch list thanks to this podcast, so it's all good.
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
And I just realized today, actually, the anniversary of the Murrah City, Oklahoma, like the Murrah City, Murrah building Oklahoma City bombings. That was a little dark. I apologize for that.
Yeah.
When was the anniversary of that?
It was today. It's today. I think it's 24 years.
Are you serious?
14 years. Yeah, 14 years.
That was well timed.
We're on a list.
Or not, I guess.
And we even talked about that during the tinfoil hat episode too.
Anywho, yeah.
All right.
So now that list has been updated and we're all at the top.
So going off grid, once you've grown all these vegetables and you've gotten good at that, the next step is preserving and canning them. Preserving or canning is a great way to preserve it. You can make anything you want. Eric, you were mentioning that you had too many tomatoes. I say there's no such thing. There's just not enough tomato sauce.
Good point.
But that by itself is an entire episode, at least one episode, because that's a whole different topic. But if you're going to grow and you're going to grow more than you can eat right now, then be prepared to can it. Otherwise, grow stuff like squash that can just live on your kitchen counter. But that's the next step. So this is a good start. We'll start growing things, and then we'll talk about how to can them.
I have a feeling come fall time we'll be doing a canning episode around August, September, somewhere around there.
I was just going to say that sounds like a good August thing. Yeah. I think my last point was going to be a throwback to the other Eric that was on a few episodes back and talked about mutual aid groups. So if your soil is really good at growing tomatoes, for example, but you can't get peppers to take hold, but your buddy down the road can get those peppers, then set that up, and if you're good at one thing and he's good at one thing, trade them and be prepared for that. So be prepared to trade, grow an extra row for them, and he'll grow an extra row for you, and everybody will be benefiting together.
Oh yeah, that's actually how I came across the Jerusalem artichokes. There is like like I said, the other guy at the south end of the town there. He is a master gardener and can garden stuff that I can't even touch with a 10-foot pole. But I trade him basically a truckload of alpaca poop. In exchange, we end up getting tons of fresh veggies and whatever heavy that we can't get going here, right? And it all works out in the end, right? As long as you are willing to have something on offer, it works out really well.
So like, a truckload of alpaca poop or part of a 10-ounce silver bar.
Exactly.
Whichever one works.
So, I just wanted to mention too, like there's tons of them around the country, but like, I mean, literally lots and lots of them. But one thing that just popped into my head was a place to get like organic heritage seeds that actually regerminate, are not your standard varieties, and come in all sorts of flavors, sizes, colors, whatever, whether it be carrots or whatever have you. If you want purple carrots, you can go get them. A place called West Coast Seeds, which is just south of Vancouver Airport. It's in Langley, British Columbia. They've got a website, westcoastseeds.com, and we've been there a couple times. It's a pretty good little store, and prices are fairly competitive, and the staff's really helpful too.
Oh, good to know.
That's cool. I think we should put in our show notes for that canning and preserving episode about how to take seeds from your existing plants and turn them into next year's plants. So just kind of thinking out loud for that episode when it comes about.
Well, I would love to see somebody show me how to do carrot seeds, because those things are small enough to begin with, but I don't even know how you get them out of a carrot. I guess it have to be a drying process or something. But
yep,
I'll figure that out for the canning episode.
Yeah.
For the canning, so there we go.
And we move into the podcast challenge?
Yeah, for sure. So our podcast challenge, I guess, Alan, you came up with this one, didn't you?
Yeah, so our challenge for this week is grow a plant. Any plant, indoor, outdoor, edible, smokable if you really want, whatever floats your boat, but grow a plant. Either start it from a seed, buy a living plant, but buy it, get it, start it, keep it alive, send us your pictures. Let's see what you guys are growing out there. I think that's a fun little challenge for this year, or for this week.
And actually, okay, you brought up a really good point. We didn't even cover it in a gardening episode. Okay, hemp and/or cannabis. I mean, it is legal now. I mean, not saying it's my thing. It's not my cup of tea. But some people swear by there's medicinal properties. Some people swear there's medicinal properties with marijuana. Hemp has oil, seeds. You can make clothing, rope, whatever have you. I mean, that'd be quite the process. But I think it is technically a weed, so it shouldn't be that hard to grow. I wouldn't think so.
It should be really. It's. I have no direct personal experience of this before October 17th of last year, but it is something that it is actually fairly easy to grow, and it grows in just about every climate, and you may or may not be able to find it growing in your local ditch or conservation area or wherever. Also fairly rodent proof, and even if it's not your thing to have around, it can make an excellent barter item. So if you run low on alpaca poop and silver bars.
Well, that's true. And I mean, I think even right now under the law, you are allowed 4 plants. I don't know. I think that's the number. I don't.
Four plants is the rule, but 4 plants, again, I have no personal knowledge of this before October 17th of last year, but 4 plants makes a lot of marijuana. Like, it's a lot.
I should just call my kids in here. They probably know more about this than I do. No, they've never touched it either, but I'm sure they've heard around school all the goodies.
Oh, yeah, I totally learned that. I didn't learn that from my geography teacher at all in grade 9, but
sure you didn't.
Exactly. So, anyways, but yeah, we should actually have touched on that. That's probably a gap on my part too. I never even thought about talking about that. But I mean, that's what BC's famous for, right? I mean, it's growing their own BC buds. So
yeah, true. Yeah. Yeah, so if you get the podcast challenge done, fire off an email to feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. Let us know what worked well, what didn't work well, any feedback that you have in regards to the show, and how you like the podcast challenge. Like Alan said, pictures or it didn't happen, but keep those pictures legal. 4 plants only.
4 plants only. Keep the rest of them in a different picture.
And actually, if we really were serious about this, we should probably get somebody to volunteer to come on and tell us how to grow it. I mean, because honestly, somebody that maybe an anonymous off-camera person or something, that if they want to come in and give us the lowdown, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, why not? It'll help with growing.
Okay, so there's imagine. Part 2 of the challenge. If you have success doing that, let us know what you did.
I'm going to have to
strictly for scientific theoretical purposes.
Yeah.
All right, let's move into episode closing. So upcoming events. Still got the annual Preppers Meet in Desboro, Ontario, July 11th to 14th. Check out annualpreppersmeet.com for all the details. You can buy a ticket and get registered to come on out to that. It's a great meet. It's been going on for a few years now. So again, annualpreppersmeet.com. Check it out and get your tickets while you still can before they sell out.
All right, and for myself, I've got the first annual Western Canada Hot Springs Meet still coming up next month, May 25th, 26th. That is the weekend after the May long weekend. Slowcoat Hot Springs, a couple links there to tell you how to get there and tell you what it's all about. Doing some campcraft discussion, meet up for like-minded people. Bit of an adventure to get there, and it's marked on the maps.me app if you just want to follow a GPS map to get there. Second one, it's actually becoming a bit of a thing now. It's a big event. Podcaster Charity Shoot, July 6th from Heller, Alberta. Newest thing, there's going to be a Stop the Bleed class. It's going to be taught by Gavin from the OG CPP, which is Canadian Patriot Podcast. There's going to be a maple seed shoot, which is basic marksmanship for qualification, basically from Kelly and crew from Slamfire Radio, and a pistol fundamentals course, which is going to be held by 80-year-old Michaud, the hunting gear guy. He's got a website and a YouTube channel as well. So there's a few things to choose from when you're there, plus the regular shoot itself for raising money for a charity, which I do believe is a cancer charity. I am not sure which one it is this year. I haven't got the details yet. But it's certainly going to be a bit of an event. It's a couple days probably, by the time it's all said and done.
Neat.
Awesome. Let's move into some shout-outs.
I'll give a shout out to my now deceased grandparents. They've been gone for about 12 years now, but they were homesteaders and preppers in their own right. Everything was reusable, was sustainable. They were canners and growers and traders and all kinds of wonderful things. But they had a massive garden, and they canned everything. My grandma's chili sauce was famous around the county for being the brand. So that was great, and I learned a lot, remembered a lot of their lessons, and we'll get closer at some point to dealing to doing what they did.
Ian, you got some shout-outs?
Yeah, for myself, I got new listener Dan, so thanks for keeping an open mind. I mentioned the title of our podcast, and he kind of gave me the stink eye at first, but I kind of explained to him that we're not all about the tinfoil hats and the zombie apocalypse for real and everything else. And he's listened to a few episodes, and we've gotten some good feedback from him. Also, the Herfster, that's his username on Canadian Gun Nuts. We met during a CGN deal. Turns out he's a listener to both the podcasts I'm on, and he's on the preparedness plan. So he said, make sure and say hi.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for tuning in, both of you.
So let's look at some email and iTunes reviews. So no new emails since the last show there. As far as iTunes reviews, my computer and my phone are battling with each other. They're not showing the same stats. So I'm going to read what's on the computer. Although the stats are produced, it says there's only 6 5-star ratings now. That one little guy, the 4-star rating, is now at 0. But the phone says otherwise as far as a few more 5-star ratings. So I don't know why they're battling, but they are. We've got a rating here from March 19th from Dr. Fuzzy Bottom. And it is actually written like that. They're not trying to fool me or anything with the name. So it says, at first I was a little bit annoyed by the skipping audio, but it's grown on me. Sounds like a conversation taking place during an actual emergency. Yeah, okay, sure. I like the simple breakdown of the main topic covered with enough detail to keep me interested. Keep it up, guys. I'll take it. And
the magical world of Sky Internet. Exactly. It's harsh some days.
Yeah, it is what it is. We've got another one from March the 6th from Just Plain Tea. It says, I'm in the northern U.S., so the climate I have is far more common with Canadian prepping concerns than most American sources. There are great considerations published by this podcast, and I highly recommend them. Oh, appreciate that.
Welcome to our neighbor from the south.
You got it.
Yeah, it's interesting with the Sky Internet too. Is like it's that battle between having the isolated acreage with enough distance from a city to make yourself comfortable, and having high-speed internet. There's always a trade-off, right?
This is true.
So if you want guys with high-speed internet, you're probably gonna be talking to urban preppers, and that doesn't do anybody any good long term. So.
No.
There you go.
So anyway.
And so that pretty short for this this section here. 'Cause like I said, no emails, so either the inbox is broken or nobody is emailing. So if you want to fire an email into feedback@prepperpodcast.ca and let us know what we're doing well or what we're not doing well. We have received absolutely 0 hate mail to date, so challenge is on.
You're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
So either we're doing really, really well, or just nobody's come along yet that hates us.
That's because we haven't covered. No, that's because we haven't covered the one gun for the zombie apocalypse. We haven't covered the best knife for EDC, and we haven't covered all the controversial topics that we're going to get told that we're complete morons. So
fair enough.
Just remember, guys, the opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is indifference.
That's right.
All right. Well, with that, I'll bring episode number 20 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast to an end. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please help us out. Take a few minutes, submit a review. It helps other people find us. You can also find us at prepperpodcast.ca.
We record shows live on YouTube chats. If you want an early peek at the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Island Retreat. Click the notifications tab. It will let you know when we are going live, such as this exact moment. You can contact me directly on Instagram at ppswo.
All right. You can reach Ian directly by emailing me at theislandretreat@gmail.com. You can also find my, I was going to say Marty and myself, but Marty's not here tonight. You can find me giving my 2 cents worth on Canadian Patriot Podcast, also available on iTunes and YouTube. There you can find us discussing the merits of a freer society, exposing more government waste, and squirreling off on the odd tactically driven conversation.
Every once in a while.
So please check out Rapid Survival at rapidsurvival.com. You can get me there in the live chat while you're buying some prepper gear. You can also email me at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. Of course, while still buying some prepper gear at Rapid Survival. Thanks for joining us, and tune in for the next episode. We're going to be focusing on dealing with crap when crap hits the fan. Until next time.
Future fertilizer.
Future fertilizer, you got it. And then you can spread it around with the fan. Until next time, be prepared, stay safe,
and keep learning.